went separate ways. And this is in an era of today where we have no-fault divorce. And so it came as a surprise, but I was already in the careers of patent law, so I thought, well, that's okay. I can just continue to work for the corporation and support the family and support the children. And then I was displaced from employment in a corporation, which meant I had to move out of state to where I was admitted to the bar, which was Oregon for me. And I went to Oregon. Then we had 9/11 and the .com, and the economy slumped. And my law firm said, well, you're the last one in, we have to let you go. We're losing clients. And so I went and had my own firm. To support myself through that, I cashed out my IRAs and my 101Ks so that I could continue to pay support for the children. And then after a year, when my oldest graduated, I finally raised my hand, I swallowed my pride, and I said, I'm not making the money I used to. That was my introduction to what goes on in the courts. So this is kind of a dissenting opinion, but although I think I want to leave it with hope, because I think even Judge Sullivan was acknowledging that there's some issues. And so with that, I'll just kind of slide into the presentation. And I thank everyone for being here. And also I want to thank everybody for being here in Vegas, because when I arrived and I saw the signs up there in front of the building, I can't tell you the smile that was in here. Because I just felt like it's not foreign. It's not just me. And there were so many times I felt like this is just happening to me, but it is real. This is real. Let me just make sure this is still working. Yeah, it's not. It's going to take a minute, I think, to turn on. But so my introduction then was as a non-custodial parent. I was in Boise at the time of the divorce, and I was working for a corporation in Boise where I was not barred. But as a corporate attorney, I didn't need to be admitted to Idaho. Well, really, as a technical writer, you can write anywhere. I'm not a trial attorney, right? So the title, has anybody seen Love Actually, the movie?
No, what is that about?
Okay.
Oh,
It's in the title. It's Hugh Grant's in there. Yeah, exactly, Hugh Grant.
Hugh Grant.
Make sure this is working. This is not good. Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. This is not working. Oh, no, it's responding. There we go. Okay, it's been the wrong screen. So, as I began to talk to many of us in the crowd, it became clear that the stories I was hearing they seemed more difficult than what I had to go through. The amount of anguish that people have experienced. And I think that's only due to the amount of love that we have for our children. And by that love, when we lose those children, or the family has been harmed, we suffer the anguish. And this is just kind of a reminder that this is not new. And if we can look all the way back, if you want to go to biblical, and you can say, a voice is heard, weeping for her children, unable to be comforted because her children are no more.
Right.
You've heard of that passage?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then we are recognizing that, well, where is this coming from? And what are the forces that are doing this? And we can see, similarly in the past, that there have been people that have done outrageous things. And this is the story of King Herod. So we look at the leader here, and it was a leader that was fearful. And the leader had pride. And by way of that, they did outrageous things. So is there hope within this? I would like to think that there is.
There is. Amen.
And so I want to bring a quote from Leonard Cohen. Does anyone know Leonard? There was somebody that knew Leonard Cohen. he has a line that I really like, which is, ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. We're not perfect. But yet, we have this within us, and we just want to voice something. But that voice is with hope. And so we need to ring the bells that still can ring. Now, what I want to do is I want to try to provide a couple of tools that we might be able to use when we hear these reasons that are presented to us as to why they're doing X, Y, Z. And so I just present problem solving. It seems like the wall has no holds. There's nothing you can do to get up it. But as we look more closely, and we listen to like Judge Sullivan, and we listen to the lady following him, we find that maybe there are opportunities. And so blue sky, what are the things that we can do? Let's just throw out ideas. Constitutionally based. We feel like due process has been absent. Oops, sorry. That rules of evidence are non-existent. We feel like the states are being told, and we heard this earlier, they're trying to implement federal law. But when it comes to the families, is that federal jurisdiction? Or is that something that should be left to the local government, the states? Why are they telling us the federal government is telling us how to raise our families in our local communities? It's unreal, but it's true. That's what's happening. And so I think there's a violation of separation of powers. I think a judge should be independent. I like the story where the judges put up the papers and didn't want to hear training about domestic violence. That's my opinion, but that's a dissenting view. I acknowledge that. But a judge should be neutral, so that he's not having his arm twisted by companies that are making money via the judge and via the states. And then we look at the administrative agencies that say they're doing these measures. They're supposed to be following administrative procedures so as to assure that we don't violate the separate and equal branches of government. So this is kind of where I'm going. Many of us feel that there has been problems with extortion. It feels like you're being extorted to see your children. I have to pay this money to see my children? For me, it felt like racketeering. Because they were doing the outrageous things, saying that there was a debt. But I didn't have the money to pay for the support. I was unemployed. And there was no modification. The embezzlements, these are critical words, but again, it's a dissenting voice. So what are the tools we can use when we see these unreal things that are happening? And I use this one because we oftentimes find people that are, well, at any rate, never mind. But 365 BC, this has been going on forever, arguments from probabilities. And in Samias, when he's talking to Socrates, Socrates was sentenced to die. And as he's waiting to die, with the administration of poison from the authorities, remember? The governor, no, you may not remember, but the governor of the local community felt that he was misleading the youth. Socrates was 70. His friends were saying, flee. And he says, I'm 70. I can't flee. It's what's going to be is going to be. But it was the pride that was in the young governor of that time. And it was a fear that the governor had. He's misleading the youth. He's leading the youth away from what I'm trying to do. So I'm bringing this up. And then I bring up Samias talking to Socrates. I think I would have much stronger faith in the first than the latter. The first has been proven and rests on fact, not merely probabilities. And that resonates with us. Best interests of the child. Who's the best parent? Who can tell the best stories? So I'm going to go to 1952, and we have C.S. Lewis. And he says, you would think that the love of humanity is safe. But it is not. If you leave out justice, you will find yourself breaking agreements and lying in courts. And in the end, becoming a cruel and treacherous individual. So we hear this. This resonates again because we've been in these courts. We're going, they won't let me tell the truth. And oftentimes they suppress the truth. At least that was my experience.
Yes. That's true.
And here we have somebody way back in 1952 that was giving us those cautionary words. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to provide tools so that you can see the shell game. We can see the shell game and recognize that there are tricks that are being used to get around what we would otherwise think. Now somebody else is mentioning Hillary Rodham wrote something back here.
Hillary is the one that wrote
1997 Adoption and Safe Families Act.
Adoption and Safe Families Act, the bonus incentives. And she
I
wants
wasn't
her
aware.
husband to enact it into law.
Clinton?
Yeah, Hillary.
Hillary
Hillary
Clinton
Clinton
wrote-
did.
So,
Bill only signed it because Hillary wanted him to.
so now we have, before she was Clinton, she went to Harvard and she wrote a paper in the Harvard Ed Review, and it's cited. And this is the best interest. The best interest operates as an empty vessel into which to pour adults' perceptions and prejudices. Now, isn't that amazing? Because when we are faced with these agencies, these individuals that have been put in these positions of social services, they come at you with the full power of the executive branch, and oftentimes with a predisposition. But they're doing it for the child, aren't they? Interesting. So I shorten this to a vessel christened best interests for the sheltering of negative emotions. So we walk in the fire. Has anybody seen The Princess Bride?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. So we walk in the fire swamp. We really do. When we were sitting out there on the street, we didn't know who was a judge, who was a pedestrian, who was just a foreign entity. And when we talk to people, we're not familiar with where they're from. If they're making money from the system, I discovered that the closer I got to the money, the more trouble I got into. So remember, probabilities is one layer of depth. For humanity is another layer of depth. And the child, 3 layers deep to hide things potentially. There's another one in here, and this is a hot potato. When you add the sex card, it becomes even more difficult to have a free and lively, open public debate for the sharing of ideas. So, I'd like to bring some clarity, and this is a man who's in Harvard. He's a professor at Harvard, and he teaches a class, I think it's political philosophy, and he has a book that's titled Justice, What's the Right Thing to Do? And it's in my other book. I was going to hold it up for you. But we oftentimes hear the argument that the ends justify the means. But we also need to hold on to the fact that every individual is a rational being. And by that, we have dignity as parents, as siblings, to our brothers and sisters. So we can't be the means to somebody else's will or what they choose to accomplish, in my view. So who is it that loves our children? Well, many of us know it too well. For me, I'm familiar with Title 4D, Subchapter D. There's an organization called the National Child Support Enforcement Association. And they work with federal, state, tribal, foreign governments, private sector. They contract with companies for governmental services. And they additionally are influenced by treaties and conventions. And I want to focus on the treaties and conventions here, because I think there's a political ideology that's being introduced very incrementally that's not necessarily what our heritage is based upon. But look at this again. I want to emphasize public officers, attorneys, legislators, judicial members. You'll know why I'm saying this. And this is from the bylaws, and you can't get the bylaws online anymore, but if you want a copy, I've got this. They want to have a clearinghouse, training. How many times did we hear training? All right. Again, I'm a dissenting voice. They're going to promote policies that will facilitate, solicit, accept fundings, grants, and that's why I was asking the question following Vicky's. Where are the monies coming from? And I was glad to hear that the lady said they're coming from private interests. Private interest. I think that's promising. I think there's hope there.
Yeah.
Could I stop you right here,
Still
just to
people first.
interrupt,
Sure.
just a part of that?
Sure.
It's not always a good thing, and I think Jan brought this point up that she was trying to make with private money. you have to be careful where that private money is coming up and the motives of that private money.
A good
And I,
point.
and I think Jan knows probably better than a lot of us in this room that hasn't really done that research on that Casey group. But if you really check into that private money, that group is financing a lot of the child welfare, and it's not always a good thing. So by them saying we're privately financed by the Casey Foundation, it's not
It could be just the
necessarily
same.
good
I see what you're saying.
private money.
I see what you're
Yeah,
saying. That's a good point.
Yeah.
We should follow up on that too, to find out a little bit more about the agency.
I think if you follow up on what she's getting to, it's not just the Casey Foundation, but if you go deeper than that, especially in Washington and Oregon, it's the Evergreen. And that same foundation, they're getting money by way of the court through their treatment plans and other ways of financing the private money. So, but you have to dig really deeply and
It's hard to find